But the stumble was one that I... Then I knew someone who is actually the sister of my wife today, my current sister-in-law, who is friends with a woman named Sarah Allen. And Sarah was dating a guy named Daryl Hall from Philadelphia. And so she had told me about Hall Oates. And I was working in a record store at the time, so I checked him out. And you know, she sort of was our introduction, right? So she told me about them and told them about me. And one day they came to Cleveland to play at a club called the Agora. They were playing upstairs. I was playing with my band downstairs. And so I went up to meet them, and we kind of like, hey, you know, Christine told me about you. And they went, yeah, right. So I gave them a demo tape of my band. And they called me about a year later, and their manager called me. Just kind of out of the blue and said, Daryl and John are looking for a new guitar player. We got 2 gigs in England, and they're putting a band together. And they asked me to call you to see if you want to come up to New York and audition. So I, of course, said, sure, you know. So I did that, and I ended up getting the gig. And it's kind of an interesting thing because, of course, we all know Hall & Oates became, I guess, the biggest selling duo of all time. And they're still at it, and they're still amazing. So when I went up to audition for those guys, I thought it was a cattle call up in New York City. You know, I'm 18 years old, and I'm a kid from Cleveland, and I'm figuring, okay, I'm not getting this gig. You know, there's probably all kinds of great guitarists. But anyhow, they hired me. At the time, they didn't have a whole lot going on. They had a new record coming out. They hadn't really cracked the code yet. Hadn't sold any records probably, or you know, made much of a mark yet. But we had these 2 shows in England. One was a private show for their new record label, and the other was a show in a theater. And they said, apparently we have some fans in England, so we're doing this one gig in London. So we did this one show in London. It was the first show we played after rehearsing, like, you know, really going at it hard for 10 days. And it was packed. Half of the British rock and roll royalty were there. Like, everybody came out. People kept coming backstage before we go on and say, you know, Bowie's here. The guys from Steely Dan are in town. They're out here. You know, everybody, you know, Pete Townsend's here. You know, stuff like that. I don't know if those are the exact names, but it was like they kept coming back and saying, everyone's here to see you guys. And so that was quite exciting. Anyhow, we went out, we had a great show, and we knocked them dead. And I swear to God, the next morning, so I recall, they were on the cover of all the British music magazines. They just exploded. I just kind of walked into it right when it happened, right when the firecracker went off. My dad played. He didn't give me any lessons, but he kicked me into all kinds of gigs because he used to play, and a lot of the things he'd get the call and he would give it to me. And the first professional gig I ever did was he used to play with an orchestra, 21-piece orchestra, and they'd do gigs once in a while. They wanted to do Classical Gas, which was a big hit, Mason Williams at the time. So this would probably be 68 or 9. And he said, I can't play Classical Gas, but my son can. And I don't know where he got that, because I never even tried to play it, but he just said, you're going to play with Al's orchestra this Saturday. Rehearsal's Wednesday. You got to learn Classical Gas. So, you know, I just did it because my father stuck me in there. And, you know, I managed to pull it off. That was the first time I ever played professionally in front of people. And you know, I was sitting there, you know, working on, you know, Rolling Stone stuff. And the old man would just kind of look at me and go, I have no idea what he's doing. You know, he didn't play open, you know. When you start to play, that's what you're doing, right? You know, later on, I figured out that was, by the way, you know. So once I got with Donnie, he kind of looked at me and he said, well, yeah, this kid can play. He was trying, you know, I'm trying to figure out Jimi Hendrix. And, you know, so Donnie right away hooked me in. He said, so let me introduce you to B.B. King and Chuck Berry and Lonnie Mack and Albert King and Freddie King. Because he could see that I was, you know, able to figure out, you know. Some of that early Hendrix stuff. But he said to me, man, let's go to where those guys went. So for me at that age, particularly 12, 13 years old, to be turned on to Albert King, you know, and he would say, yeah, you got to go out and get B.B. King's live at the Regal, and then we're going to learn, I can't remember which one. But we learned Albert King, Freddie King, Lonnie Mack. You know, one of the first probably things I remember that Donnie made me learn was Memphis by Lonnie Mack, which was an instrumental version of Chuck Berry's Memphis. You know, and I probably can't remember it, but it kind of went like. You know, it was that kind of thing, you know, and it had this whole thing to it, you know. It had the bridge. So, you know, that kind of stuff before I got into a band was, you know, I was really lucky to be learning, you know, all that really integral early rock and roll stuff. You know, Chuck Berry riffs and all that, whereas otherwise on my own I probably would have been going after the Monkees, you know. From the round of the road, someone's gonna hurt you like you hurt me. Anyhow, it had all kind of, you know, yeah, baby, you just wait and see. And Lonnie did he did a lot of instrumentals. Another one was Wham, which I probably can't remember at all, you know, with like. and so on, you know. So another one, a great Freddie King one, was The Stumble. Fleetwood Mac did that one. And it's just kind of funny, you know, because white kids like me who were 14, 15 years old would be waiting tuned into, you know, Fleetwood Mac or Led Zeppelin, but not where it came from. So that's a really interesting whole story unto itself, you know, how the British rock and roll guitar players brought us our own American roots music.
Thanks for watching the Vault Sessions. Every view and subscription we get helps us buy guitars for kids. Click here to subscribe, click here to watch more Vault Sessions, and visit our website here to learn more about our Guitars for Kids program. We'll see you next week.